Hey guys, it's the WalterFootball.com After Dark Show for December 6th, 2024. We're going to be doing the Week 14 NFL picks against the spread for the Thursday thoughts. Before we intro our co-hosts for tonight, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video. Visit the link in the description for the merch store. As you can see, I have changed shirts. So I wore the same shirt Tuesday and Wednesday. I'm up to November is Sloth Month, so we celebrate all the months here. You can get that shirt as well as many others, including our famous apron here at the WalterFootball.com merch store. It's unfortunately not 30% off anymore. It's 25% off. Still a good deal, though. You can get high-quality shirts for $16 to $19. The apron's $23. So if you're looking for a Christmas gift, I think you're going to get this in time. So I think that would be a good idea. Or you can go to Amazon, buy my books. Jerks of the College Years is the most recent one where I made fun of people I saw at Penn State. I was there for 6 years. So as you can imagine, I had a lot of writing material, as you can see on the cover here. My other book was How the 2020 MVP Was Stolen. It's how Brett Favre tried to sabotage Aaron Rodgers. I wrote this expose a few years ago, so you guys can read all about that. Or you can try Super Chats, Super Stickers. That's the best way to support the show. We've had some really good Super Chats, Super Stickers recently. Slew yesterday, recently as well. John Sanders, Drove for Show, Can Make an Eagle, Jesse Cintron. You guys have been so awesome with your contributions. I can't say enough because these YouTube ads just pay almost nothing. So that's just a great way to support the show, and I really thank you guys for doing it. All right, so we are joined by Andy Isco. Andy, how are you? How's your week 13? You're on mute.
There we go. Yeah, I am fine. Week 13 was just so. The thought I had was when you're showing the shirts with the theme for months, I wonder if the theme for December is "Be kind to turkeys who made the cut."
We don't actually.
As a reference to surviving Thanksgiving.
Yes, we actually don't have a December shirt. That would be a good one. Someone, Kenny from last night said we needed a Hunter Biden pardon shirt, which I did get some good ideas tonight. January's Envy Month, which is coming up.
See, the problem with doing any sort of political thing is that you alienate half the audience. You don't know which half, and it doesn't matter which half. But that's why I've never understood when people, and I listen to to a lot of radio, and they'll do commercials. Maybe they'll do it for their pizza place or their pet store or whatever, and they will put their political views in there or something, and you can tell which side they're on. Why would you want to drive half of your potential customer base? I mean, pizza stores are pizza stores, and you have your choice of pizza stores. You have your choice of pet stores. Why, from a marketing standpoint, would you want to alienate half of a potential audience? Never made sense to me.
Yeah, I think everything now is politicized, though. Even like Target is even they got in trouble for the Pride Month stuff. They actually had to. They're getting sued by their shareholders because their market cap decreased so much from the Pride Month stuff. So everything.
There's a perfect example of why they shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
They could feel that way and express. I wouldn't even express it on social media. If people know the name who you are. Have your views, whatever, but don't associate it with a significant livelihood. Well, because remember, it's not just affecting the store itself. It's affecting all the employees of the store if the volume profits and the revenues go down. So I've never understood why people would deliberately do something that they should reasonably expect would alienate half the audience.
Yeah,
but that's just me.
Yeah, well, I think it's so divided now that half the audience doesn't even go to some stuff anymore.
Yeah.
I
think that they used to go to, and then said, you know what, I'll find an alternate to go to where maybe I don't know their political views, whatever they are, but at least they're not sharing the ones that I disagree with, and so I'll go shop there. And something, it was kind of like, and we saw it in football with the Kaepernick situation. Mm-hmm. I never really, look, if the guy can play football, he can play football. Let him play football. You could certainly understand him taking, I guess you give him kudos for sticking to his beliefs, but sticking to his beliefs, also ultimately ended his career, or certainly he says he still wants to play, but he's been offered some coaching opportunities, but he basically alienated part of the fan base that took a long time to come around to, supporting the 49ers again. That sometimes you have to put aside your own political views because, and now there's criticism the other way too. In other words, people will say, okay, you've got a platform, you're a big famous athlete or whatever, entertainer, use your platform, and some will, some won't, but for the most part, companies are made up of shareholders, and shareholders have differing beliefs. But anyway, that's an aside.
Yeah. John points out he was Blaine Gabbert's backup. He got benched in favor of Blaine Gabbert toward the end. And Marshawn Lynch did the same thing. Like he knelt during the anthem and he kept his job, and it was because Marshawn Lynch was a good player.
Yeah,
Colin Kaepernick was he was trending out of the league as
funny how that works.
Yeah, exactly. The good players stay in no matter what they do, and the bad players, it's probably like an expedited exit for them.
Kind of just like why do all the flags go the way of Kansas City?
Right, exactly. All right, let's get into these games, and we kind of start off with one I'm really not interested in. Although I don't know if you wanted to touch on Packers and Lions at all, because
we talked about it before we started recording the show, and Dan Campbell. I mean, he goes for it all the time, but I said at the time that it was a mistake when he went for it on fourth down from his own 31-yard line or something. With I think at that time they had a 3-point lead, and he had already been. I think about that time he was 2 for 2 on third downs, because I think he ended up 3 for 4 on going off on fourth downs rather. I think he ended up 3 for 4 with the last one being the one at the end of the game that sealed it. But at the time it was, I think was it 31-28 I think it was at that time. And when you go for it deep in your own territory, and I'd say the 30-yard line is pretty deep in your own territory, you are basically conceding a field goal if you miss it. If you make the first down, there's still no guarantee you're going to score, although likelihood you would get you still have to go down the field a little bit, and there was still like 7 or 8 minutes to go in the game or something like that when he made that decision. Now on the other hand, late in the game, he made the right decision, because even if you on 4th and inches, even if you didn't make it, Green Bay at that point had no timeouts, about a half a minute to go, and the game was tied. So at the very least, he would have had overtime, to go by. So I understood that decision. It ended up working, even with the near fumble by Stafford when he slipped down at that point. But I thought at that 8-minute mark that Campbell, if they had lost the game, I think that would have been the play that the blame could be placed, because they ended up not getting the field goal. They got the touchdown to go up 31-28.
Yeah. Right. So I agree that going for it on the 31, I thought.
I'm sorry. I think it was they went up. What was it?
They kicked the field goal because
31-27. It was 31-27, I think.
They stalled. They went 30.
Because it's 34-31 final. Yeah.
Right. So I thought going for on 31 was bad. I did like at the end going for it, because I thought if the Packers got the ball back, they would have forced overtime. Especially with these rules where you start at your own 30. Like all you really need is 2 passes to get in the field goal range these days.
Yeah, but when you mean when they went for on 4th and inches at the end?
At the end.
Yeah, because Green Bay had already used their timeouts, and I think Campbell, who did the right thing when I think they called the timeout. I think right before they had the play right before the 2-minute warning, which helped Green Bay because the guy went out of bounds with 2:01 left, so they still had one play before the 2-minute timeout. But I think he did the right thing finally. Oh no, actually, I think he sort of got away with it. He let the clock run down from 27 to 2, okay, and then they went for the field goal. I would have let it go down to because I don't think it wasn't 4th down. I think at that point, I'm not sure, because I would have let it go down to 7. If it was 4th down, then it was the right thing. If it was only 3rd down, I think you got to give yourself a little time in case there's a bad snap or something. You want to at least have another attempt at it, and if with 2 seconds to go, if there's a bad snap, boom, you're in overtime.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's John S. saying, can someone explain that to Emmanuel Ocho is kind of losing his mind on
Yeah.
Twitter. I don't think he understood what happened at the end. So that was funny. And yeah, something tells me Campbell speeds up at intersections when the light goes from green to yellow. I
Bet
was
on
saying
it.
Andy, yeah, I was telling Andy that I think that Campbell, I was actually texting that with Evan. Evan is like, I bet Dan Campbell hits on 18. I'm like, I bet he hits on 21.
Yeah.
That's how he goes, and it works for the most part.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it doesn't backfire.
Well,
But
it's one thing. It's one thing for doing it. I mean, here's another thing. I forget who it was in the first quarter. I think Green Bay wasted a timeout for something. I think that to challenge a spot or something.
yeah, bad challenge.
It's early in the game. You can overcome it. Okay, they gave it to they made it. I think they gave him the first down. He lost the challenge. But I mean, I think you always should consider the risk versus the reward. And if the risk in some cases could be fatal, don't do it. You still have a chance. If you make it, great, you've won. If you miss it, be sure you have an opportunity to have it again. So it's like a lot of those times at the end of games, when do you go for it too? Late in the game, if you make it, that's great. If you miss it, game's over.
Right.
And you lose by one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Especially if you're the better team, you should win in overtime. And especially if you're the if you're the better team with the better defense.
Right. Exactly. As far as John saying higher percentage kickoff return touchdown or botch snap, that's what you were saying at the end. Like, not don't call a timeout with 2 seconds. Call like maybe 4.
It's not zero. Let me put it that way. It's not zero. It's close, but it's not zero.
Yeah, I think even like if you call timeout 4 seconds, like if you botch a snap, you might be able to call a timeout with like 1 second left.
Because they had a timeout left. Yeah.
Yeah, and at 4 seconds, at 4 seconds, just the time's still going to expire. So like, I think the correct thing was 4.
You mean the time's not going to expire with 4 seconds?
Right. Yeah. So like, yeah, if you botch the snap with 4 seconds, you maybe call timeout real quick with 1 second left.
I don't know if you can call a timeout once the play is underway though.
Oh no, I mean, as soon as you recover the ball, I don't know how quickly that is. I have no idea how quickly that can.
Well, there's a split-second reaction time from the time the ball begins to be snapped to the time the timekeeper starts the clock.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. All right. Anyway,
I would say the odds of a botch snap are less than a kickoff return. Well, I would have said that last year because you don't have that many kickoff returns to begin with right now.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Yeah, we thought we are going to have a lot of kickoff returns this year, and apparently, well, unless if you're playing against Seattle, then you're going to have that. Anyway, we have we're going to start with Atlanta and Minnesota. This line's Minnesota minus 5.5. So injury wise, there's only one note I have here. Stephon Gilmore was DNP twice for Minnesota. So
I wonder if he's related to Pappy.
Pappy Gilmore.
There you go.
Pappy Gilmore.
You remember that movie?
Yeah.
Was that Tin Cup?
Oh, I thought you were referencing Happy Gilmore. I don't know.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, Happy Gilmore.
Yeah, Happy Gilmore. Yeah,
you're the movie guy.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't watch many movies. I watch more TV shows than movies. But these days with kids, it's kind of like
tough.
Kind of go away. Yeah,
tough to watch uninterrupted.
Yeah, I mean, I watch a lot of Paw Patrol with my son.
Yeah,
I know all the Paw Patrol names, which I never would have imagined a few years ago. Anyway, so we have Pappy Gilmore's son. Stephon is DNP twice, which has to help Kirk Cousins here. Cousins has been terrible lately. It's hard to imagine backing him. However, I don't like Minnesota much either because they've played 5 games ever since Christian Darrisaw has gotten injured. They've won those 5 games, but they've beaten bad teams or mediocre teams
and they've generally been close margins.
Right, exactly. Their biggest win was against 10 by 10 against Tennessee, which is like not really convincing here. So do you lay points with this mediocre producing team in Minnesota that's a paper tiger at 10-2, or do you back Kirk Cousins who's throwing interceptions like he's giving out candy on Halloween? I don't know what to do with this one. I'm leaning Atlanta. What I do like in this game is Kyle Pitts over receiving yards. It's only 33.5, I think it's 31.5. I think he's going to get going here against Minnesota's defense, which can't stop tight ends. But regardless, I don't don't know what to make of this game. Do you have a strong lean here?
Not really. I mean, I know there's been a lot of speculation about when would they give Penix a shot. I don't think it'd be this week because Cousins is going back to where he had his great success last few. Well, not so much last year, but certainly 2 years ago when he got him, into the playoffs before the Giants of all teams wiped him out in the wild card round. But nonetheless, Atlanta certainly seems to have the talent to be able to compete. Actually, Atlanta, and usually the basic metrics. And here's an example of inefficiency. They're number 8 in total yards, but only number 19 in scoring. And a lot of that has to do because they lose a fair amount of turnovers that interrupt drives and basically say, here's the yardage that went for nothing because they got nothing out of it and gave the ball away without concluding the possession with a score or a punt. Don't know that I can lay it with Minnesota. Don't know what we're going to get. My curious thing is that if Cousins struggles and let's say they're down 17-3 at some point and he's had 2 picks, if the coach Morris just doesn't say, you know what, we got to give Penix a shot. We're losing the game. Minnesota. I don't want to say Minnesota can afford the loss because no team can afford the loss really when you're 10-2. And you got a 1-game lead over Green Bay, and you're 1 game behind Detroit, regardless of how ugly the stats may be relative to both of those teams, which is the case with Minnesota. If the game goes to 6, I might consider a play on Atlanta. It is somewhat of a key number, but I think that there are better games that interest me a little bit more out there. So right now, I would pass on that one. That might be a good candidate. If you watch Atlanta's first 2 drives, and let's say there's no score, then maybe you can get Atlanta at that time. Maybe the line would be +5 or +5.5 if it's 8 minutes into the first quarter and it's scoreless and Atlanta has possession. And Minnesota has possession, so you're still getting points, decent points with Atlanta.
Right. I think I think every game interests me more than this one. So glad to get this one
even Tennessee, Jacksonville. Or should we withhold on that one?
We'll see. Cam Eagle says, which team has the worst secondary? I think Atlanta definitely does.
You mean of these two teams, or
these two? Yeah, these two. I would say Atlanta does. They are healthier than they were in that Denver game. And we had a question about will Cousins be motivated? I have to think, how was he not motivated last week coming off a 38-6 loss before the bye?
Well, I think going back to face his old team, but the question is, did Minnesota say, we don't want you anymore, or did he opt to say, let me test the free agent waters, and Atlanta said, or Minnesota said, go ahead?
I think Minnesota wanted him. I think they wanted to pay him, or I don't know. They did. I mean, he had a great year last year until he got injured.
Because I could understand if he wanted to stay with Minnesota and then the Vikings said, we're going a different way. Then I could understand the motivation. We'll show you. Although he ended up, maybe you should send a thank you note to the Vikings. He had a pretty good contract with Atlanta.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think motivation is the key here. You have to be motivated already with this losing streak. They're 6-6. They're on the precipice of losing the divisional league.
And you've got to believe in that division, and probably, although a lot will depend on Washington, but probably the NFC West, only the division winner is going to make the playoffs because the division winner could be 9-8 or 10-7. I can't see a second place team being 9-8 in those divisions.
Yeah, no, I can't either. It's going to be Detroit, Green Bay, Minnesota, and Washington as the wild card teams, unless one of these teams suffers a colossal injuries. You have to think that those three are being. So this is for all the marbles.
Yeah, I would say right now it's because I think they still have to play again. Green Bay and Minnesota could end up switching places if not Green Bay. I'm sorry, Detroit and Minnesota have to play again. Detroit, I think, won the first game. They win the first game, I think, in Minnesota. Yep. I think they host Minnesota the last game of the season. But you have to believe right now Green Bay is going to make it as a wild card because I think the loss tonight, not mathematically, but effectively eliminated them from winning the division title because even if there were a tie with Detroit and Green Bay, Detroit swept them. So I think for all intents and purposes, Minnesota can still win the division. Technically or mathematically, Green Bay can, but have to take an awful lot of things, including Minnesota and Detroit losing all but one game between the two of them to the end of the season.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the next game. We have Saints at the Giants here. The Saints are favored by 4.5. It was 5 earlier in the week, so it's fallen a little bit. There are some injury notes here. I was worried about the Saints' offensive line because they were missing both Eric McCoy and Cesar Ruiz, and they lost one of their backups last week. But Eric McCoy limited twice so far. Cesar Ruiz was DNP on Wednesday, but then he was limited on Thursday. On the other hand, with the Giants, the Bobby Okereke or Karake, however you pronounce his name, he was DNP twice. He's a key factor in the middle of their defense. So for me, I like the Saints here. I love the idea of fading the Giants. I think they are in full tank mode. The ownership, the front office, and the coaching staff let them know that by benching Daniel Jones and then cutting him. And then you had all these Giants players come out and voice their frustration. And the past 2 games, they've been no-shows. Like they got blown out by Tampa, and then they lost to Dallas. It was only 20.
Well, they showed a little something against Dallas, but you never felt they were going to win the game. But against Tampa, they were dead from the start.
Yeah, and this is very similar. The Buccaneers are better than the Saints, but they're not that much better than the Saints. And I think that the Saints could go into New York and beat them pretty convincingly. I don't.
Well, we saw what the Saints could do the first 2 weeks of the season when they were pretty much fully healthy.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, they do have a lot of injuries. They lost Taysom Hill, and we don't know if these linemen will play. That's going to be key for Friday, especially McCoy, who's one of the best centers in the NFL. So I like the Saints here. It wasn't too far back that they destroyed the Browns 35-14, and the Giants are a lot worse than the Browns. So I think they're the worst team in the NFL. Like, we don't even know who's going to play quarterback for them. I assume it's going to be DeVito, but it doesn't really matter. And I can't see this team showing any fight. They lost Dexter Lawrence, by the way. They're just a mess. And if Karake is out too, like that defense is going to have no fight at all. So I think Alvin Kamara is going to have a huge game here, and the Saints are going to win. So what do you think about this game?
I'm not high on this game exactly. I could almost make a case for the Giants only because you're laying so many points on the road with New Orleans. But what's the difference between New Orleans laying 6 and Tampa Bay laying 6 2 weeks ago in the same 6 or 7, whatever you got the number? It's basically the same. I won't say the same team, but it's basically the same difference between these teams as you had. So whereas early in the week I was thinking more about the Giants. Not going to play this game, but if I were forced to make a selection today as opposed to, let's say, on Tuesday, I'd have to think New Orleans is the better team. And you said a lot. What you said about their decision with Daniel Jones to demote him. Now they released him because Jones asked for his release, but to put him behind Locke, when he was the starter all season, and should be no worse than backup at that point, unless it tells you something, or unless they were basically doing it, I think, for injury insurance purposes, which doesn't show that you're trying to win games. That the problem with the Giants is more than Daniel Jones, and a lot of it is trying to block for Tate right now. So Locke rather right now. So I'm not going to play the game, but I would say that if I were now, I'd have to lay I have to lay 6 or less with the Saints.
Okay, yeah, we agree with that. What season is more disappointing, Jets or Giants? It has to be Jets, I think. I mean, Giants. People thought they might be better, but the Jets.
Well, the Jets had a higher season win total by I think the Giants were 6 and the Jets were like 9 or 9.5. Yeah. They had the much better quarterback. They had the much better defense. They had we didn't know neighbors at the time, but I think they had a competent receiving crew compared to the Giants. I think the defensive lines I think were pretty decent for both of those teams, but I think overall, I'll just go with the season win totals. Jets were expected to exceed the Giants by more than by 3 to 3.5 wins, and they both may end up with the same number. So I guess you'd have to say from that perspective, the Jets have the more disappointing season, if only because what was expected out of them and the fact that whether it's Jones, Drew Lock, whomever, or Danny DeVito, Tommy DeVito, that Aaron Rodgers, his annual his worst year of stats. Well, Jones had that one good year, but his worst year of stats or his second worst year of stats might have been, the equivalent of what all three of those quarterbacks have done over the course of a full season. So so I'd say the Jets had the much more disappointing season.
Yeah, I mean the Jets were 24-1 to win the Super Bowl. The Giants were 100-1.
Yeah.
It's I mean the Jets, like they were flawed as we've seen, but people really thought they were going to win the Super Bowl, whereas the Giants never had that sort of outlook. Like people thought maybe Giants compete for a 500-ish record.
Nobody well, it was clear that it was going to be, well, it started off Dallas based on the odds, then it went to Philadelphia and it went even more to Philadelphia, but the expected finish was Philly, Dallas 1-2, and then a gap. And then it was a question of who finishes third and fourth between the Giants and Washington. And of course, Washington, you had a first-year coach, you had a rookie quarterback, and with the Giants, at least you had an experienced quarterback. A coach who was in his third year, I think, with Dable, who had that great year 2 years ago, and then things fell down last year. And a coach also who comes over who got the job because of his offensive credentials, more recently with Buffalo, as opposed to Quinn, who coached previously and was a defensive-oriented coach. And I think the fact is that the Giants were expected to, because of Daboll, get something more out of Daniel Jones than he did. So I would say that, the expectations were understandably better for the Jets.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely for sure. All right. Let's get to the next game. We have Jaguars at the Titans. This game's going to be excellent. Can already tell. So this line is Titans minus 3.5. Some injury notes here. So Roger McCreary and more importantly, T'Vondre Sweat, both DNP so far. Also, some linebackers on the Titans. You had Kenneth Murray and Jerome Baker, both DNP as well. So not that those are good players, but T'Vondre Sweat's a really good player for the run defense. So not having him would be a big deal, I suppose, unless the Jaguars keep running ATN, who's just terrible. Like I feel like Bigsby will give him a better chance to run. But this Jaguar team's just such a mess. For me, this is I don't really like either side here. Like I don't want to bet Mac Jones, but laying 3.5 with the Titans just seems very unappealing as well. But I know you have a stronger take on this, and I know that because I read your newsletter, which people can subscribe to, not here, but from the logicalapproach.com. You guys go to logicalapproach.com and sign up for the newsletter. You will not be disappointed. Andy has so much on the newsletter. So I highly recommend that. Not just NFL picks. But
by the way, it is thelogicalapproach.com because 25 years ago or whenever it was when I went for logicalapproach.com, it had already been taken by some, I think it was a bourbon company or something like that.
Wow, that's weird. thelogicalapproach.com. Sign up for the newsletter. NFL, you get NFL picks, you get college football picks, and then you also get some great research.
I haven't had a chance yet this week to put up the spreadsheet. I'll be doing that after the show tonight, and also have to modify the package or the newsletter that I have for the balance of the season. Because basically after this weekend, it's Army, Navy, and the College Bowl, so that's a separate thing that we put in some special pricing and all that for that as far as that go, which has had a good track record over the last several years, especially in the bowl games. I love that time of the year because you get to analyze teams that have a lot of unfamiliarity with one another. But as far as the Tennessee game goes, I do like Tennessee in this spot. My one concern is their lack of efficiency with offense. I talk about that X factor, which was a correlation between yards gained and points scored. Well, Tennessee is number 29. They're 29 in total offense, 28 in scoring offense. So there's a correlation there, but they are number 2 in total defense, 292 yards a game. But that doesn't translate into preventing points because they're number 27. They're actually allowing just a half point less than Jacksonville, 27.7 for Tennessee, 28.2 for Jacksonville. And part of the reason is they are tied with the Raiders, last in the NFL in offensive turning over the ball, 1.9 per game, 23 so far this year. On the other hand, two big negatives for Jacksonville. Tennessee can turn it over But Jacksonville does not turn it over. They are number 31, ironically, the same as Jacksonville with the turnovers. In forcing turnovers, they have forced only 8 turnovers this year. That's 0.7 per game. So it's like the movable object against the very movable force to sort of like go the other way around, where neither team can really take advantage of the other team's weakness as opposed to strength versus weakness. But the big key to me, and I mentioned that the Tennessee's number 2 in total defense. Okay, yardage, 292 yards allowed. Okay, that is 114 yards less than Jacksonville allows. Jacksonville is number 32, allowing 406 yards per game. Now both of these teams have very weak offenses. Okay, in fact, they're separated by just 1 yard. 297 versus 298, and it doesn't really matter which is 297 or 298. They're both very bad. However, you would think that Tennessee would have a much better opportunity of getting yards going against that Jacksonville number 32 defense. And let me just see here for a moment just how far they are ahead of number 30. I think it's about 15 or 18 yards, 14 yards, I think it is, versus a Jacksonville offense that is as equally inept going up against a team that allows under 300 yards per game, especially when you have a Jacksonville team that doesn't create turnovers. So that tells me that Jacksonville will finally be able to limit their defensive the defensive yards allowed and not worry about losing the ball on offense that would create points that they don't get or that they would allow to the opposition, because the opposition, Jacksonville, doesn't create turnovers to add possessions to their game. So it's a long way of saying I think 3.5 is a decent number. Tennessee is still playing very hard. It's just total disorganization with Jacksonville. It's really been that way the whole season. You have to wonder, does it make sense to get rid of Peterson right now? Well, if you have someone on the staff that you think might make a good interim coach for the job next year, maybe you do. Otherwise, you just ride out the season. I think Tennessee can win this game 7 to 10 points at home.
Okay. Yeah, definitely stronger take than I have, which is just pass on the game. All right, let's get to the next game. I like more, but depending on the injuries, it might change. So we have Raiders and the Buccaneers. Buccaneers favored by 6.5. So there's a lot here. Starting with the Raiders, Nate Hobbs, their best cornerback, DMP twice. He's been out recently. The bigger news here for the Raiders is Jacoby Myers was downgraded in practice on Thursday. He was full on Wednesday, and then he was DMP on Thursday with an ankle. So that's definitely something to watch out for, because midweek downgrades are usually a bad sign. Also, Aiden O'Connell was DMP today with an illness. I looked it up. He's just sick, apparently. So I don't know if it's the flu or something.
Yeah, I think it's called Raideritis.
Right, exactly. Just it's something we're going to monitor. Of course, if there's an illness that starts spreading through the locker room, it's going to be bad news for them. For the Buccaneers, Mike Evans DMP twice with hamstring/calf. I expect him to play, but you just never know. If he's DMP again on Friday, then suddenly that's looking very iffy. Bucky Irving DMP twice with that hip injury that he suffered late in against the Panthers. And then Tristan Wirfs was DMP twice. He came back last week after a hiatus, so he hasn't been able to practice. So Evans and Wirfs are the two most important guys. Like Irving, obviously, really good player, but I'd be fine with the Buccaneers without Irving, because they still have Rashad White and Sean Tucker. Neither is as good as Irving, but still, like, running back is not that key. But Evans and Wirfs being out would be very important here. So assuming these guys can play, I like the Buccaneers to win this game pretty handily. I talked about how bad quarterbacks have done against Todd Bowles' scheme. I brought that up repeatedly. I brought it up initially a couple weeks ago when they were playing against Tommy DeVito. Bowles just shuts down bad quarterbacks, and I would put Aiden O'Connell in that group, despite what he did on Black Friday. But if they're missing Evans and Irving and Wirfs, then suddenly it's not looking as great. So right now, I have Buccaneers penciled in as a potential Super Contest pick. But like I said, if these guys are out, then I'm not going to remove that pick. So what do you think about this game?
Yeah, I don't like Tampa Bay for a lot of the reasons you mentioned as far as the uncertainties go. I was impressed with Vegas last week. They I won't say should have won the game, But they certainly should have an opportunity to win the game at the end before Antonio Pierce went Matt Eberflus there at the end of the game with the confusion. By the way, that's I think I don't know if we didn't do it last week because well, maybe we did because the Bears had already made the coaching change that now when a coach makes a blunder decision, it's known as an Eberflus.
I like it
because I think he's patented the phrase, or copyrighted, I guess in this case. Nonetheless, I like the way that the defense played last week against Kansas City. I like the way the defense has played very often. I like the fact that in many of these games the Raiders have gotten the backdoor cover. They haven't been embarrassed. I mean, this is a team that really, when you take a look at them, they are still down towards the bottom in running. In fact, they are, let me see where it is here. They are 32nd now this week, 78 yards per game on offense. Not that Tampa Bay is a great defensive team. In fact, actually, the Raiders allow a couple of yards less, 115 versus 117. And Tampa Bay is a top 10 running team. The Raiders do have a better, statistically, at least on yardage, a better pass defense than the Bucs do. And I was surprised that the Raiders actually, again, in yards per game, they're actually number 14 in the league. You would think with such a lousy running game that they might equally have a lousy passing game, especially when they rank overall just number 25 in total offense, barely over 300 yards a game. So I'm not going to play this game. At 7, I would consider Las Vegas. But I would just consider hey, I'd like to root for it and be right on the pick, but not necessarily have anything out of pocket invested.
Okay. All right. We'll move on to the next one. Browns at the Steelers. Steelers are favored by 6.5. Not too many injury notes here. The only two things I have are Cedric Tillman, DNP twice, coming off the concussion that he suffered on last Thursday, or the Thursday in the snow game. So he's still not able to practice. Jedrick Wills, DNP twice as well. He's been out for a while. He was benched anyway, but his backup got hurt. So I imagine they would like him back. But yeah, he's DNP twice. Neither of these injuries is really going to affect my pick here, which is the Browns. Now you get the full Jameis experience here if you pick the Browns, and I mean that was mayhem on Monday night. I had the Broncos in the Super Contest as my final pick. I was 4-0. And I was like, man, I went back and forth. I was like, yeah, we're going to cover. And then it's like, no, okay, we're not going to cover. And then, yeah, we're going to cover. Not going to cover.
Whoever won that game, whoever covered that game, the team could have also had a bad beat. There could have easily been 2 bad beats. You just didn't know which team would suffer it. But there were 2 bad beats in that game.
Yeah, no, it was crazy. And I call Jameis Winston the most exciting player in the NFL just because anything could happen when I release.
He keeps both teams in the game.
Yeah, he threw 6 touchdowns against the Broncos, 4 to his team, 2 to Denver. So here, it's a tougher defense. Pittsburgh, I imagine, will want some revenge. However, they play the Eagles next week, and then they have the Ravens after that. So I don't even though they just lost to the Browns, I don't know if they're going to be fully focused here with the potential look ahead. No, maybe they will be, but they're coming off a big win against Cincinnati as an underdog, and here, I don't want Mike Tomlin as the big favorite. Anything over -3, it just stay away from me, knowing Tomlin's history. So I'm going to be on the Browns. However, I don't know if I can bet them just because I feel like I had 5 years shaved off my life in that game. I can't handle anymore. I need a break here. So. No money placed on the Browns here, but maybe you like this one. What do you think about this game?
I've seen some 6.5s around town, and if it goes down to 6, I will be on Pittsburgh, notwithstanding Mike Tomlin in the role of a favorite versus his role in an underdog. It's an important game for Pittsburgh to win. When you consider the fact that with Baltimore losing to Philadelphia last week, the Steelers, with a win here, because Baltimore's on a bye, could get a 2-game advantage over the Ravens for the division title. They won't be a number 1 seed because, because you still have Buffalo ahead, even if Kansas City falters, and Buffalo would get that number 1 seed most likely. But yeah, Pittsburgh does have Philadelphia up next. They also have Baltimore the week after that, and they also host Kansas City the week after that. So, and then they play Cincinnati at the end of the season, but it may be a meaningless game for Pittsburgh because they'll probably be locked into a wild card game. The question is, where will they be playing? They not being a division winner, they won't get to host a wild card game, so they might very well rest players. I talked about that scenario last week. If Cincinnati took advantage of, if they won last week, they could take advantage of their schedule the rest of the way it's set up. Pittsburgh is sort of the opposite. They have to look at this as a game that if they want to win the division, they need to win this game because they still have a game at Baltimore in Week 17, and they have that Philadelphia game in between. So, if we have seen Russell Wilson really make a difference with that offense. So, whereas I would never think that I could think of Pittsburgh winning a two-score game against most teams in the league, certainly competitive teams in the league. I'm not sure where you would put Cleveland in that scenario. I mean, they're coming off of really their Super Bowl 2 weeks ago, beating the Steelers on that Monday night game in the snow, and then they came off an exhausting game last week where they had it pretty much in control and did things against what had been a very good defense in Denver, and of course the antics of Winston didn't help. So Pittsburgh right now, I think they feel very comfortable with their offense. The way that they've been able to move the ball and score. Haven't played it yet. I'd like to be able to lay just -6. At -6.5, maybe I make it a half play.
Okay. Like I said, I won't be betting this one. All right, let's move on to the other the Pennsylvania team, the Carolina at Philadelphia. This line has gone up from 12.5 to 13.5. So maybe we'll see some 14s in the near future and get to that key number.
Are you talking first half or full game?
Right. So yeah, I mean, we'll see.
I'll get to that in a moment.
Yeah, it could get ugly. The one injury note, or two injury notes, one for each team. Josie Jewell, a talented linebacker for Carolina, was downgraded from limited to DMP. And then for the Eagles, Devontae Smith has been full in practice twice, which is key because Dallas Goedert looks like he's going to be out. They said week to week, so I imagine he's going to be out this week and then maybe next week after that. So for me here, if you told me the Eagles were going to be 100% focused in this game, or even like 90%, I would be on them. I don't trust Carolina despite what we've seen recently. Like Bryce Young has had 4 really good games by his standards, at least. Ever since he was reinserted into the lineup. However, all 4 of those opponents are mediocre or worse defenses. Now he gets the Eagles, who are number 1 in defensive EPA. So it's going to be a tough challenge for him. Now, he's protected well, so that's going to help. He's Adam Thielen back, which obviously will help as well. And the Panthers pass rush has really improved ever since DJ Wonnum returned from injury. So this Panther team is much better than the team we saw early in the season that was getting blown out. But I think this is just a major step up in competition. So I think the Eagles could easily destroy the Panthers. However, I'm just thinking about this. Like the Eagles also have this look ahead. They play the Steelers next week, then they play Washington, and then they play Dallas. So they could be looking ahead, and this could be a similar game that we saw about a month ago when they played Jacksonville, and they were up 22-0, and then they started goofing around in the second half, and then Jacksonville had this cover at the end. So I could see that happening. I still would take the Eagles, though, if I had to in an office pool or something. But I don't know. Do you have a stronger take on this than I do?
Well, I did play the Eagles in the Super Contest this week because I did play Detroit. The line was -3 in that game, so I got the push out of that, which is what I thought the game might end up being. I also bought the half point and laid the 3, out of pocket. The Carolina Panthers have not played a true road game since they were at Denver on October 27th. Since then, they did play away from home when they played and held on to beat the Giants in, I think that was the Germany game. Yeah. But after that last true road game at Denver, home to New Orleans, Giants in Germany, where both teams were road teams, open date, their bye, at home to Kansas City, at home to Tampa Bay. So they Bryce Young started to play well and they started to play better, they really haven't had to go into a hostile environment. And they're going into Philadelphia where, they've got that game against Pittsburgh coming up. I think the Eagles right now, especially remembering how they faded down the stretch last year, and if they need any momentous or push to focus. You just pointed it out, how they struggled, how they barely held on against Jacksonville a few, I guess it was back in early November. Okay. Their defense has really started to come alive over the latter half of the season. The offense really has been performing well all year, especially that running game. They still have a shot, right now tied with Minnesota at 10-2, and one game behind Detroit. So if Detroit falters, the Eagles could find themselves out with that. I won't say necessarily all important, it certainly is, but certainly all coveted, all desired bye week in the wild card round of the playoffs. So, you're asking them to win basically by 14 points. And, I can certainly see, again, given the fact that Carolina's on the road, even just away from home, the Germany game was November 10th. So you're almost a full month. I think, what's the game on the 8th? I think is a Sunday. That's almost a full month of not having to, pack your bags to go on a road trip. So that could be a little bit different, getting used to that, and especially in a hostile environment where they say, when it snows out, they throw snowballs at Santa. They may throw rocks if there's snow here. I mean, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it really is one of the more hostile, difficult places to play in the league. Not that I don't know how much the players really feel about it, but they certainly have to hear some of the noise that the crowd makes, which is very effective. So I do think the Eagles win this game rather comfortably. And I want to see what happens, with Pittsburgh and Cleveland this week, because that could be a really, really good game next week with the Eagles hosting the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, well, what people always reference in Philly is that they booed Santa Claus.
Yeah.
That's
right. I think they threw snowballs at Michael Irvin.
Yes.
They booed Michael Irvin when he was carted off the field for an injury. Right, that's what it was. Yeah.
Right.
Back in the early 90s.
Which I always thought the Santa Claus thing was preposterous, because
until you saw it.
I was a little not born yet.
Oh. I think I think now it's become somewhat of an annual tradition. No, not the Michael Irvin one, the Santa Claus one.
The Santa Claus. Well, yeah. I always point out, like, hey, they actually did not boo Santa Claus, and people are like, "What do you mean they did?" Yeah. I'm like, "Well, Santa Claus is not real. Let's point that out." No,
was it like a fan doing something, like trying to run on the field, and they were booing the police, taking them away, or something?
So the story I learned the story behind this. The Eagles were supposed to have, like, they hired a Santa Claus to perform at halftime of a game. And he didn't show up for some reason. And so they found a guy in the stands dressed as Santa Claus. And so they got him out, but he was drunk. And so, like, he was like tripping all over the place. And so they booed him because he was not the real Santa that they wanted to bring in. And, he was, like I said, he was clearly drunk. So they were booing that situation. It's not like they're not booing Santa Claus. Like,
I would think if you had a drunken Santa out there, I think that'd be hilarious. I'd be cheering.
I know. Yeah, I actually that would probably be better.
I'd be saying bring him back next week dressed as the New Year's baby or something.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So it's all exaggerated, but they did boo Irving. But like I feel like a lot of cities have that too. Like, we've seen state, like, was even college football this year, they were throwing bottles, and I remember they did that in Cleveland and then New Orleans back in I think it was 2002 or 2001. They were doing that as well. So each location has its negative fans, except for maybe like the Chargers, who don't have any fans. So there's that. So anyway, let's get to the next one. This is the last of the early games. The Jets at the Dolphins. This line keeps falling, which is not a surprise. This line opened up Dolphins -6.5. It's down to 5.5. So the Sharps once again are backing the Jets. Which, like, again, I mean, how much money can you possibly lose the Jets?
That seems to be, every year, we've talked about it before, there seems to be one team that they continue to back week after week after week. They continue to lose week after week after week. And finally, if they have any money left, and they finally won. See, I told you. And the Jets have that team this year. I mean, how many times have they been favored this year? The only one I think I recall them winning was that Thursday night game against Houston.
That is the one game they've covered since week 3.
And I think, weren't they favored I think it was maybe even the week before, weren't they like a 2-point favorite at Pittsburgh?
Yes, they were favored in every game up until last week, and then they were favored at the end.
No, they were favored by 2 against Seattle, and of course they should have covered that game. But then they remembered they were the Jets, and they messed up right before halftime, and decided, you know what, we're not getting paid enough. We're only going to play a half this week. Didn't score any points in the second half.
Yeah, no, I mean they scored 21 points right away, but all that came on special teams, and so they didn't score anything after that. Like for example,
but you're up 21-7, and it looks like you're going to be up 24 or 28-7. And then you have that Leonard Williams.
6-6, yeah.
You know, I went out of breath watching him lumber down the field.
No, yeah, we'll get
former Jet, Williams. By the way.
Yeah, right. We'll get to Leonard Williams in a second. He's been DNP in practice twice. I wonder if he's just exhausted from that run still.
Probably.
So I mean, this Jets team has been favored every week except for Pick'em at Arizona, but they were -2 at Pittsburgh. They were -7 at New England. They lost outright. They were -2 against Houston on Thursday night, which they won. Again, Pick'em against Arizona. That was 31-6. They were minus.
Were they favored against? What was it, like -1.5 against Arizona? Didn't that flip around?
Okay. Well, I was looking at this. That was a super contest line. I'm sorry. I think the Jets were favored by the end. I think you're right about that. And then they were -4 against the Colts at home. And then, of course, Seattle was favored to start the week, but then the Jets closed as favorites. So I mean, obviously they're not going to be favored here unless Tua trips on his dog or something and then is out.
Unless Tua pulls a Jared Goff.
Yeah.
Right. With the fumble the near fumble at the end.
Right. So I don't understand backing the Jets. Like, they are one of the worst teams in the NFL. They have no redeeming qualities at all. They can't block. They can't throw. Breece Hall's injured, which, by the way, let me get to the injuries. Breece Hall, DNP twice. Sauce Gardner, DNP twice. Elijah Vera Tucker, DNP twice. CJ Mosley was downgraded from full to DNP. The only thing for the Dolphins is Terran Armstead's DNP twice, but I don't think he's practiced in months. So, and he keeps playing. So I would assume that's going to continue. So yeah, I mean, the Jets can't do anything. They can't. They've actually been better against the run. Funny enough, like that was their big issue to start the year. They couldn't stop the run, and like now they're actually somewhat decent against the run, but they can't stop the pass. They lead the league in missed tackles per game. They're very poorly coached, and I don't see a reason why they would show up in this game. They are done. They know it, and not only do they have a lame duck coach, they have a lame duck quarterback. So. They have nothing to build on for next year either. Rodgers is gonna leave, I assume. Devontae Adams, they're probably gonna cut. They're gonna have to start over. And why would they show up against Miami? A Miami team that slaughtered them twice last year. Now I know one start was with Tim Boyle, but still, the Dolphins.
That says it all right there.
Right. The Dolphins, we know what they are. They beat bad teams. They lose to the good teams, and the Jets are clearly a bad team. They are. I have them bottom 5 in the NFL, and according to the EPA, the metrics have the Jets as the worst team in the NFL. So I like the Dolphins a lot here. I think they win easily, and I think the Jets quit. I think this is it's going to be a 2-3 touchdown win for Miami. So what do you like this game?
Yeah, I'm right with you on that one. I feel just as strongly. Let me just see what I wrote a little bit here. The Jets continue having difficulties on offense. They're ranking number 31 in total offense, and largely due to a number 29 ground game, which I think I said is 87 yards per game. Miami's here's the key point that I wrote about. Miami's overall offensive numbers must be taken in context, as they average just 10.0 points and 275 yards per game in the 4 games that Tua missed, versus 24 points and 355 yards in the 8 games that he's played. That's a sharp contrast. That's a 14-point difference going from 24 with him to 10 points without him. And even the yards were showing about an 80-yard difference just with Tua being in. That's 20 yards a quarter. That's a couple of first downs and et cetera. Miami's last 2 home games have been wins over Las Vegas and New England by 15 and 19 points. And the Jets, I say, are certainly in the class of the Raiders and the Patriots, if you want to rank them that high.
Yeah.
The Jets, I mean, if you want to rank it, it's a dysfunctional franchise. I grew up listening to New York radio when sports talk was just beginning, and I still follow New York radio, and there are a lot of great people on there. And I really enjoy Monday mornings listening to a couple of the shows there where they are really, really, really fanatic Jet fans, and they just blast the team. They blast the ownership. They blast the general manager. They blast the mayor. They blast the governor. Everybody. I mean, with the Jets' futility, and they continue to find new ways to give up games. Now, maybe they cover this game. Maybe they're competitive, but you got to remember, in a football game of 60 minutes, each team is going to have to, for the most part, overcome some adversity, maybe multiple adversities. You never know when or how or what the situation will be when those adversities cover. I mean, even we see it with teams like the Lions overcoming adversity at points scoring game. It's how you handle the adversity, how well prepared are you for it, and how you succeed. And inevitably, when those critical times come, the Jets are unable to handle the adversity, and to a certain extent, they can't enjoy prosperity. Just witnessed that 21-7 lead last week against Seattle when they weren't really playing all that well, but they took advantage of their opportunities early.
Yeah, no, and they were gifted 21 points. Like, it's not like they did much to earn it. It's all special teams nonsense. So you can't count on that every week, and especially against a new team here. And
let me put it. I was going to just put it this way: if I bet on Miami and lose, okay. It just was one of those things. If I didn't bet on Miami and they won, I'd say, why didn't I just go with what made common sense?
I know. It's people. We're talking about how the sharps are on the Jets every week. Like, people have been making a lot of money fading the Jets here. Like whoever's done it. And I finally, I kind of learned my lesson last week. It's not like I was betting the Jets; I just was avoiding them. But last week I finally took the plunge and bet Seattle, and I felt like an idiot when it was 21-6. But then, of course, Seattle came back and won, where the Jets didn't score a single point at halftime. It's just like not a surprise that Ulbrich couldn't make any halftime adjustments, and just this team is so poorly coached. It's not even funny. So
I think, again, part of it is that the overall numbers suggest that there's not that big of a gap here. I mean, just even using some of the basic numbers: points scored, points allowed. The Jets are minus 3.5 points per game. The Dolphins are minus 2.9 points per game. Okay, yardage. Miami has a slight edge, a 30-something yard edge. Defensively, the Jets have a 10-yard edge. These are the basic numbers. And remember, a lot of the square players just look at these basic stats without doing the deep dive. What surprises me is that the people the sharps, quote unquote sharps, they do the deep dive, and and maybe they're still relying on some of those numbers for whatever reason. I mean, you take a look at I would think, based upon their play this season, most people would have to rate Tua the better quarterback versus Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Rodgers is playing on reputation, but you can even see it in his movements. He's not as quick. He's a little bit more tentative, even though he's rarely tentative. He's a little bit more reluctant, and there's just not that talent around him. And like I say, I'd rather go down losing but having bet on Miami than losing because I didn't bet on Miami.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Or not winning because I didn't bet on Miami.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, Aaron Rodgers just turned 41. I like, Peyton Manning was done by 40.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
Brady and George Blanda are the exception, although Blanda was mostly a kicker, but occasionally did play quarterback for the Raiders, I think, till he was like 49 years old.
Yeah, Brady was.
But that was in the old day.
I feel like people just saw Brady and they thought, oh, Rodgers can play till he's 45 as well. It's like, no, it's only been done once since Blanda, like you said.
Yeah.
So,
and that wasn't really a true, that's back in the ancient days of football.
Right, exactly. John, bringing up how much the stats are skewed because Tua missed.
That's what we just mentioned. Yeah.
And
big difference. 14 points. Just to put it in context, 10.0. That means that they averaged 40 points in those 4 games, 10 points per game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they couldn't do anything in those games.
That's less than half of what the average NFL team scores over the course of a game. I think the average is like about 20, 22, 23 points per per team per game. Average total points are somewhere around 45, 46 in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and they were even worse when it wasn't Huntley either. It was, they went Skylar Thompson or Tim Boyle, who were much worse than Huntley. And Huntley wasn't even that good, but like Huntley was at least a big step up there.
I'd have to think that the drop off from Tua to those backups has to be amongst the top 5 drop offs in the league, and I'm still struggling to find out which the other 4 would be.
It has to be, because I think Mike McDaniel was really exposed as not being able to coach in those games nearly as effectively. And like it's not just the quarterback; it was him. Like there were 2 games, I reference this all the time. There were 2 games in that stretch where Alec Ingold, the fullback, had as many touches as Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle combined. Like not just one game, but there were 2 games, and I just like, what are you doing? Like how do you not try to get the ball into your receiver's hands, where you're relying on your fullback to move the
Well, was that lack of trust in the backup quarterback?
I don't know what it was. I think it's just bad coaching.
Maybe because you put Hill and Waddle in positions where they don't catch long passes, but they catch things over the middle. You draw plays where you could have a couple of decoys and they could end up at least getting 3. And even if you don't gain 35 yards, 15 yards is a nice gain.
Yeah, give them a bubble screen or something.
Yeah,
an end around, like something. Like they didn't even do that. Like it was so pathetic. I don't know what they're doing. Yeah, I wonder how much the line. John asking because we might get this. I think it's an important question. What would the line move be between Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor if we get Taylor, for example, next week or next week after? Do you think
field goal?
Do you think it'd be 3 points?
Maybe.
Yeah, I guess Rodgers is a big name. I think it'll be exaggerated.
Well, I think also part of it is that Rodgers gets a lot of the blame, but also a lot of the players around him aren't performing well. You've had drop passes, you have bad routes run and everything. Maybe that's also due to the lack of timing, because it's really the first season that Rodgers has been able to practice to whatever extent he practices during the week with the receiver. So it's not all on Rodgers, but so much of it is that you'd have to think that a backup would still be playing with the players that Rodgers couldn't connect with. And, and again, how much of that had to do with Rodgers and how much had to do with the players, you could argue, you could debate on that one, but I wouldn't say it's 90% one versus the other. It's probably more closer to 50-50, 40-60, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Let's get to the late afternoon games. So we have the team that beat the Jets last week. We have Seattle at Arizona. This line is Arizona minus it's 2.5 or 3, depending on where you look. Also, the big plays into it. I like Arizona here. I'm not in love with this game. I might be, depending on the injuries. And let me read you the two or actually 3 big ones. I referenced one already. Leonard Williams DMP twice, which is very significant because their run defense has improved exponentially ever since Williams got healthy. Now, I know they also traded for Ernest Jones from Tennessee, but Leonard Williams has been one of the better defensive linemen in the NFL this year. So if he misses this game, that is a colossal absence. DK Metcalf got downgraded today, limited to DMP. So that
I was going to say, but excuse me, just one more. I want to just give you a little bit just to justify your point there. And I like to divide take a look at what Seattle played, like 12 games or something, and first 6 versus last 6. Seattle in the first 6 games of the season was allowing 145 yards per game. In the 6 games since, that's down to 109. That's a significant improvement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, they've been so much better, and it was Leonard Williams getting healthier, which there were other keys too, but that was the big one. And then Metcalf, like I said, limited to DMP downgrade. That's big. Also, Kenneth Walker was limited to DMP downgrade. Now, this is the least meaningful, I think. Walker hasn't been that great recently, and Zach Charbonnet is a decent backup, so I'm not too worried about that. It's more Leonard Williams and Metcalf for me. So as far as this game's concerned, I like that Arizona is coming off a recent loss to Seattle. Now, the NFL started doing this where I don't know why, but they matched up 2 teams within a span of 3 weeks, and so
we see that with Pittsburgh, Cleveland.
Right, exactly. And I did the research on this and to see how the teams come off revenge. So the teams that lost that first matchup, if they are not favored by 6 or more, so as long as they're not big favorites, they're 46-31 against the spread in their revenge game, which is about 60% cover rate.
Yep.
Now, I don't hate I don't love like just blindly going on trends, but this does remind me of the zigzag rule in the NBA playoffs, just because like Arizona is going to have a better game plan prepared for Seattle, and Seattle, they may not make adjustments because they feel like they may not need to, especially given that they're coming off another win here against the Jets, which was, across the country. Now they have to go back across the country, so they are traveling here. So I do like Arizona here. Not in love with the 3 at 2.5. I like it a lot better, obviously. So what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. Maybe I like it a little bit more than you do, but certainly at 2.5, I almost love it. Okay, that's really strong play. In their first meeting, Arizona was coming off of their bye week after playing a couple of home games against Chicago and the Jets. Meanwhile, Seattle was coming off of that last-second win against San Francisco the week before. So, interesting enough, you might have expected Seattle to have a letdown and Arizona to be the better prepared team because they were rested with the bye week, and it turned out to be the opposite, although it's hard to say one or the other because the score was only 16-6. And I think if that game, I remember correctly, Arizona had only, I think, I want to say they had like 49 yards rushing, okay, and Seattle had 65. But they didn't run very often. I think the numbers actually showed that Arizona, I think, they had 14 rushes, I think, for 49 yards. It was like 3.5 yards per rush versus 2.9 for Seattle. Not a big difference, but it also shows that Arizona, when they ran, was a bit more effective. And as far as the total game went, I believe Arizona outgained it by, I think it was about 90-something yards. I mentioned the first half, second half stats, and this is, again, it goes up to matchups. Seattle does not run the ball very well. Okay. In fact, in the first 6 games, they averaged 96 yards per game. They're down 15 yards in the last 6 games, down to 81. Well, let's take a look at Arizona's run defense. In the first 6 games, Arizona was allowing 153 yards per game on the ground. Over the last 6 games, 82. So whereas Seattle has declined somewhat in their ability to run the football, Arizona has improved greatly in their ability to stop the run, and at the same time, Arizona had been able to run for 145 in the first half. They're decent enough. It was running at 138 in the second half, so not much of a difference. And meanwhile, I mentioned that Seattle had improved their run defense in the second half. So it's a concern about the defense of Arizona, which has shown significant improvement going up against what was already a weak and now is appearing weaker Seattle rushing offense. That being said, I do like Kyler Murray versus Geno Smith, who is not having the same strong performance that he had in the first part of the season. I'm trying to remember if I had the TD numbers here for these time. Both quarterbacks have passed for 13 touchdowns, but whereas Smith got off to a hot start, he's had turnover issues. But he has had twice as many interceptions, 6 versus 12 for Geno. A lot of them have been lately. It's an important game for Arizona to this extent. They are 1 game behind Seattle in the division, and it's unlikely that anyone other than the division winner from the NFC West is going to make the playoffs. A win here at home for Arizona ties them with Seattle at, I think it would be 7-6. Okay, but so you still have to go to tiebreakers. But Arizona already has that lopsided home win against the Rams. They still have a rematch, and they have that narrow win at San Francisco. I just mentioned, with the earlier in the season as well that they have. So they also have to play the 49ers again. So it's an important game for Arizona, who I think effectively controls their own destiny, because if they can win this game and win for a second time against the Rams and the 49ers, they'll be 5-1 in the division. And I think Seattle, what could they be? I think they lost one of those games against they split with the 49ers, and I think they would have split with Arizona, so they would have at least 2 losses. So Arizona could be in control of their own fate, and if they're not, then they would lose out on any tiebreakers to Seattle and also be 2 games behind them. So, yeah, it's an important game for Seattle, but it's equally, if not more important for Arizona, considering they lost the first game, yet you could argue they didn't play as poorly as a 16-6 score might suggest relative to what Arizona didn't do.
Yeah. Glad we agree on this one. Kimigu says Connors over 70 yards is -120. He did nothing in Seattle. Yeah, watch out for Leonard Williams. If he's out, that's going to help him a lot. But if Leonard Williams plays, then the under looks good there. We had a fantasy question. Should I stash K-Makers, Tajay Spears, or Kamani Vidal? I would say Vidal because it feels like he has the easiest track record or easiest track to be a starter. Whereas, Aaron Jones is not going to be removed as a starter. Tony Pollard's not going to be removed as a starter.
Yeah.
Gus Edwards could be because he's not good. And Vidal has some potential. So I would definitely go Vidal. All right, let's get to the next game. It is Bills at the Rams. I actually have no injury report updates on this one. Everyone seems to be fully practicing or limited. So nothing to watch out for there. There always could be a surprise injury. Come Friday, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. This line has gone down though. The Rams are taking money. It's down to 3.5, which I disagree with. This is not a strong play for me by any stretch of the imagination, but I think the Bills are the better team. Obviously, they've done way more, and with the Rams, I can't think of an instance where this team, ever since they won the Super Bowl the year after, where they were worse, and then moving forward, when have they beaten an elite team? It seems like every time they go up against an elite team, they get clobbered. The Lions game from the playoffs last year and this year. Now I know they were close games; they still lost. The Eagles last year destroyed them. The Eagles this year destroyed them. The Bills, they played the Bills to start the year, and I think it was 2022. They got destroyed as well. This Rams team is really well coached, and they're not going to make mistakes for the most part. And so they're going to play sound games against mediocre or bad teams. They're going to beat most of them, but against the elite teams, they don't seem to have a chance. So I think the Bills look good here. However, the Bills, they're in a sort of a sandwich situation where they played the Niners in a big game on Sunday night in that snow game. And then coming off that game, next week they have Detroit. So
at Detroit.
Yeah.
Also.
This could be a look ahead, which is why it gives me some pause. If the Bills didn't have a look ahead at all, I would like them a lot. But I don't know how focused they're going to be. Now, it is a trip to the West Coast. They could deem it as like a business trip of sorts. And the Bills, to their credit, they have not looked ahead. People thought they're going to look ahead earlier in the year when they played the Colts because they had the Chiefs the following week. They beat the Colts 30-20. People thought they were going to look past the Jaguars because they had the Ravens in week 4. They slaughtered the Jaguars 47-10. So, just because they haven't done it doesn't mean they won't do it, but they at least have sat on these teams. So, I'm leaning toward the Bills, but the possible look ahead gives me some pause. So, what do you think about this game?
Yeah, you're just wondering, how long, Buffalo can keep playing at that level. How long can Philadelphia keep playing at that level? And what happens when they start to not play at that level? And we sort of have seen it with Detroit. They were just cruising along, and they played a rather blah second half last week against Chicago that almost cost them. And they were not dominant by any stretch of the imagination tonight. And of course, that coaching decision by Campbell almost cost them. And you wonder if the same thing might just happen a little bit to Buffalo. I don't think it's really a look ahead game to Detroit. At the same time, I mentioned that they still have an opportunity to catch Kansas City should Kansas City fall, and Kansas City has given you every opportunity to opposing teams to take them. If you look at the numbers of Kansas City, especially the points differential, you'd say this is a team that might be 8-4, something like that, not 11-1. So you look at a team like Buffalo right now. They are playing, along with Philadelphia, I would argue, the best football right now. I'll still say Detroit's up there. It's a spot that normally I would look to play the Rams, and
I might very well take the game if it goes up to 4.5, because I do like the edge in coaching for McVay that he has in this game. But he doesn't have Josh Allen, and that's always a concern. And if you're going to pick a guy in a late game situation, maybe you go to Mahomes first, and maybe you go to Josh Allen next. I mean, he's had the issues in the playoffs, but a number of those issues because he was going up against Mahomes. So you can do that as well. But Allen is playing at an MVP level, so I'm reluctant to bet against him. But if I look a little bit more at this, and I can really make something out of the coaching edge and some of the numbers that I've been looking at, the Rams, starting to run the ball a little bit better than they had been. That's still not a strength, obviously. And of course, they have the two outstanding wide receivers that, and Stafford's a more than a capable veteran as far as that goes. So, if this is a place where Buffalo might slow down a little bit, I could see it. Probably won't play it, but at 4.5, the probably won't might turn into a quite possibly will.
Okay. John Sanders, 311 super chat. Thank you so much, John. Really appreciate it. Why was Allen's touchdown to himself not a running touchdown? He's asking. It was a pass play. I mean, it wasn't a running play; it was a pass play.
So and I guess it to be a pass play, legal pass play, it had to be from behind the line of scrimmage, which I think it was.
Yeah. So
even though he was the second player to touch the football after he got rid of it after the snap.
Yeah. So it was a forward pass to Cooper, and then it was lateral, and then it wasn't it didn't turn into a running play just because of the lateral. It's still a receiving play. Anytime you see like those weird laterals at the end of games, if that player scores a touchdown, it's going to be a receiving touchdown.
Yeah.
Not a running touchdown. So and then he says but it was a handoff backwards, which is really weird. Well, the initial pass was forward to Cooper, and then
the lateral was backwards because forward lateral ends the play.
Right, exactly. So so it was still a pass play that was a lateral backward.
Yeah.
Your
example was correct when they do that pitchy woo woo stuff at the end of the game. If the first start of the it often ends as a result of a completed pass, and then he'll lateral it backwards to the closest offensive player near him, and it goes down as a passing play. And although I think those who touch it running it, they get credit. I don't know if they get credited with rushing yards lost or how that would work if they end up losing yards. But
they do.
A touchdown would be a receiving touchdown.
They do correct. The final guy gets credited with the receiving yards, and I know this because Jalen Waddle had a negative 22-yard loss on a lateral on those pitchy woo woo play at the end of a game. I forget which game it was, but he took a negative 22-yard loss and he finished with negative yards on the day just because
like 6 catches for negative yards, something like that.
Yeah,
maybe not 6, but yeah.
Right, so they do add it to the last guy. So in this play, Josh Allen was the last guy, and he got the touchdown. So if Allen had lateraled it again to someone else, and then they scored, that guy would have gotten.
They would have gotten a receiving touchdown.
Right, and then Allen wouldn't have gotten anything on the side.
Right.
So that's how it works. John Sanders, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Gary asking what happened to your guy Jacob that was always on the channel with you. Jacob, he unfortunately had to step away due to personal stuff. He could maybe be on in the future as a guest, but he had to he couldn't do the show any longer. Allen had 0 receptions and 1 receiving touchdown. Exactly. It wasn't so he didn't catch the ball. Cooper caught the ball, but then he got the receiving yards and touchdown, or he got the touchdown at least after that. So, that was weird.
That is one of the most weirdest things in sports.
I know. It's
that's from a statistical standpoint.
Yeah, I know. All right. We have the last of the late afternoon games. Bears.
Because you know what happens? People in the future are going to look at that. They'll be doing some research back and says there must be a mistake here somewhere.
Right.
They're crediting him with 22 yards. But he has no receptions. There's got to be somebody must have screwed up somewhere.
Yep. Exactly. And they're going to change it, and they're like, "Oh, we fixed the problem."
And I said they created the problem because now it's not factual information.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. All right. So we have Bears at 49ers. This line fell a little bit. It went down to 3.5. Then it popped up a little bit to 4. So obviously the Niners injury updates is key. Nick Bosa has not practiced yet. Trent Williams has not practiced yet. Aaron Banks has not practiced yet. Now, they might get back Diamador Lenore, Talanoa Hufanga, and Dre Greenlaw. They all have been limited in practice, so we don't even know if they're going to play, but they could be a little bit healthier, but still, it looks like they're going to be missing their main guys. Some Bears injuries, though. DJ Moore was DNP twice, DeAndre Swift DNP twice, and Roshan Johnson DNP twice. So obviously DJ Moore is the big one there, and I think Swift to an extent too, because the 49ers are very poor tackling, especially with Fred Warner playing on a fractured ankle. I like the Bears a lot here. I think the Niners are, I call them a falling knife, comparing them to stock, where stock is $5, used to be 50. People are like, oh, Niners only -4 against the Bears. This looks great. But, in 3 weeks, this line may look high because the Niners keep losing. And if it's announced on Friday that they're going to get these guys back, like Williams and Bosa, then I may change my tune and go with San Francisco instead. But right now, thinking that these guys are going to be out, I definitely like Chicago here. The Niners, they haven't been beating anyone. Like they almost lost to Tampa without Mike Evans. They have been blowing big leads all year, and they just got smoked. Twice, 2 games in a row. I know one was without Brock Purdy, but still, like they got destroyed at Buffalo. I know Chicago's not nearly as good, but Chicago I think is a little underrated because while they're 4-8, even if you just reverse the Hail Mary and the blocked field goal, like they'd be 6-6 and they'd look a lot better now. And I think people would have more confidence betting them here. And they've had other close losses too. Like for example, last week against Detroit, that could have gone to overtime, except Eberflus froze at the end. In Minnesota, they lost in overtime. So this team's been pretty competitive for the most part, and they fired their coach, which is usually a bullish thing for the short term. So, usually the players will want to make sure the finger is not pointed at them. And so I expect a pretty spirited performance by the Bears here. So I think they win outright. So who do you like this game? You're on mute, Andy.
And I had my hand on the button, and then I moved it to grab some papers. Okay, the Bears have been done good things, but they still come up on the short, and they find ways to lose games, or their coach finds ways to lose games for them, and that's a concern. San Francisco, they still have a talented roster. Unfortunately, a good part of that talented roster is not healthy, and it's putting a lot more pressure on the guys who are filling in for them. I'm not sure that I can lay the points with San Francisco. I'd like to think I can, because Chicago, they just can't find ways to enjoy success. I mean, you talk about the Hail Mary, but there's again, they make the proper defensive alignment on the play before, and then guard the out of bounds. They never get the chance to throw the Hail Mary. You talk about the blocked field goal in that game against Green Bay, where they mismanage the clock. Maybe they don't get that chance to do that. So teams that shoot themselves in the foot, somehow, it's almost like the Jets. They can't stand prosperity. The few times that they have it, they'll find a way to undo that. San Francisco, they're struggling because, again, I think a lot of it has to do with the injuries, which creates a lack of continuity, going from one set of players or receivers, running backs, whatever you want to call it, in one week. And of course, did you mention about McCaffrey on the IR, and right, I think Mason's on there as well. Yeah, okay, yeah. So that's a difficult thing. So I probably have to pass this game. I do like what you said about because I've mentioned it as well, the new coach theory, especially because, and we found out afterwards that the players were pretty much in revolt against Eberflus. Okay, mm-hmm. That it was he had lost the locker room, and it wasn't just this the Thanksgiving Day game; it had been lost before that or getting close to it, and they genuinely had liked what Thomas Brown had brought to the team since he was made offensive coordinator a few weeks earlier. They're playing hard. They're doing more things to allow Williams to be a more effective runner and passer. And so I think that, you hear about the rally around it, and maybe they are catching the 49ers at the right time. The only
reservation I have is you still have that San Francisco pedigree. They still have an opportunity to make the playoffs despite being, 5-7, because they play in that horrid, I won't say horrid, mediocre NFC West, because I think the teams are basically 5, 6, 7 wins. So, it's not like they're all 3-8 or anything like that. So I can certainly make a case for Chicago plus the points. The question is, can they win the game? Or can they, maybe they've got like a 2-point lead, and San Francisco ends up getting a touchdown instead of a field goal at the end of the game. So I probably can't play it. I think it could be an entertaining game. I think that if I started to look over it again, I'd probably be on Chicago based upon just the competitiveness that you mentioned. So I'm going to pass this one.
Okay. All right. We have a big Sunday night game. Chargers at the Chiefs. This line is Chiefs -4. It was 4.5. It went down to 3.5. Went up to 4. So it's gone both ways here. The Chargers have some significant injuries.
I think the Chargers have some significant injuries, and the Chiefs are getting healthy.
Yeah. So with the Chargers, Ladd McConkey, their new number 1 receiver, he was iffy for this game. Jim Harbaugh said he'd have to work through some stuff. He was limited twice, so at least he hasn't missed practice. So there's a chance that he's going to play. Denzel Perriman limited twice as well. Having him back would be huge because without him, they really struggle against the run. It may not be as bad for the Chargers as we initially expected, but again, it doesn't mean they're going to play. So these guys could be out. So for me, I like the Chiefs. Now, the Chiefs have barely beaten some horrible teams. Like they stuck by the Raiders, they stuck by the Panthers, and this has been the case all year for them. It's like nothing new. However, when they've been tested this year, like week 1 against the Ravens, they were blowing up Baltimore until a couple late touchdowns. Against the Niners, they blew out the Niners. So I feel like whenever they're put, and also against Buffalo, like that game was back and forth. Whenever they're pushed, they show up because they don't treat the regular season like other teams. Like they're like an NBA team almost. They goof around, they do stupid stuff, they experiment at the goal line.
They pick their spots.
Right. They take deep shots on 3rd and 2 at the end of the game for no reason when running the ball for 2 yards would have ended the game. Like they do asinine stuff. But this team, when they are focused, they can be a lot sharper. And I think, maybe I'm wrong here, but I think the Chargers will get their attention because the Chargers have been making some noise. The Chargers are, the bigger threat in the division. I know the Broncos also have 8 wins, but if the Chiefs lose here, they're only 2 games up on the Chargers. They have Herbert, Jim Harbaugh. Historically, this has been the team that has been giving them the most issues in the division. So I think they will show up. Plus, it's a Sunday night game. I think they will show up, and especially after getting so much criticism on Twitter after nearly losing on Black Friday. I think they're going to have a better effort here. Now, again, I could be wrong. If they're goofing around again, then they're obviously not going to cover. But I think they will be more focused here, and I like them at -4. So what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I'm taking a look because this Chargers team has come along as I thought they would come along under Jim Harbaugh. It would take him some time. He'd start to put his imprint on the team early. And I'm taking a look at the way that the defense has continued to play all season. I'm looking at their losses. In their losses, they allowed 20 points to the Steelers, 17 points to the Chiefs, 17 points to the Cardinals, and then 30 points in that loss to the Ravens, which was at the track meet a couple of weeks ago. So they have generally been able to play well in losses as far as the defense goes. And, they are still overall, even with Bosa being out a little bit and all that, being injured, they've still been able to compensate. When you look at the Chargers, let me get the numbers up here. As far as what they've been able to do defensively throughout the year with an offense that's improving, they are still number 1 in the league in allowing just 15.7 points per game. And Kansas City, you take a look at some of their offensive efforts. The median is probably right around that number. As far as it's probably a little bit higher, but it's under 20, I believe, the median number of their games, not the average. The Chargers, when I look at what they can do, is they're not explosive on offense. They can run the ball pretty much the same as Kansas City. However, the thing that I like about the Chargers
is that they do not turn the football over. They have lost only 6 turnovers this season. That's a half a turnover per game. At the same time, they've created 17 turnovers, or forced 17, or benefited from 17 turnovers, whatever phrase you want to use there, 1.4 per game. Kansas City's been pretty good, but it's still a little more than twice as many times they've turned the ball over, because Mahomes is not having a typical Mahomes season, especially with the interceptions. And they, as a defense, even though it's been a very solid defense, they have only forced or benefited from 10 turnovers this season. So it's some of the things that Kansas City has not been doing that they have been doing in years past, and some of the things that the Chargers were unable to do in past years, especially like avoiding turnovers, that they are doing this year. First game was 17-10. Chargers got out to a 10-0 lead, and then they never scored again, and Kansas City actually tied it, and they scored the winning touchdown, I think, early in the fourth quarter to win 17-10. Well, Kansas City has shown that the team we saw then, they have not really improved all that much overall, especially offensively, since then, except with a couple of occasional efforts. But the defense also has been a little bit shaky lately. Meanwhile, the Chargers have continued to play solid defense, and at the same time, Harbaugh's let Herbert do a little bit more, got more comfortable with some of the young receivers that they have. McConkey would be a significant loss, because he and Herbert have developed a nice chemistry, and the fact that Dobbins is now out shoulders more of the rushing on Edwards and a couple of the other backups. So I'm going to rely on. We're seeing here Pacheco back for, and aren't they getting an offensive lineman back, the Chiefs, this week as well?
Well, they're getting DJ Humphries for the first time.
Okay.
So they signed him a couple weeks ago. He was out. He's been out the whole year, and they've had severe issues at left tackle. So I
wonder how the timing will affect them.
Right. The thinking is he can't be worse than what they've had. So yeah, it should be.
Could you get a lot of false start penalties? Unfortunately for the Chargers, they don't have 70,000 screaming fans while the quarterback's trying to call signals. But nonetheless, just the way that the Chargers have slowly improved the use of Herbert and been able to at least show some, I'd say, steady improvement offensively. And again, they've played well enough in their losses, not getting, like I said, 30 points was by 10, the most points that they've gone up, even though they've lost 4 games. So I'm on the Chargers. I want to wait and see if the line goes up a little bit. I know that a lot of the sharps are on the Chiefs this week, so maybe I'll get an extra half point out of this. But it's one of those games where, again, I'm relying on Jim Harbaugh and his familiarity, his experience. But of course, he's going up a coach as equally as successful in Andy Reid. Of course, Andy Reid's tendencies are a lot more known.
Right. I have to ask you: does it affect your handicapping or bother you at all, or anything to know which side the sharps are on?
No, it's just if you're looking to play the game and you're against the sharps, you might want to if you're looking to play it's not going to influence who I'm going to play on. Mm-hmm. And look, there's no better example than all the support for the Jets this year.
Right.
Okay, yeah. But what it does impact the timing of the play and the number that you might be able to get. So from that standpoint, do I bet now? Do I bet? The old saying used to be, if you like favorites, bet them early. If you like underdogs, bet them late. It's not always true anymore, because there are some fashionable underdogs that go in, and like the Jets could be one of those underdogs. Not the Jets, the Chargers. Well, the Jets too, for example, because they are taking money against Miami. So that if you like the favorite, and you see that there are popular underdogs, and I don't know that you never lose money, but you don't lose nearly as much, and you probably even make money if you go against the contrarian moves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I figured as much. But speaking of sharp movement, we have some here. With Cincinnati and Dallas, this line moved from 6 to 5.
How could there possibly be sharp movement in either way in this game?
I actually I like it. I like Dallas quite a bit in this game.
I do as well. But when you take a look at the body of work, how many times have you been burnt with both teams this year? With each team this year?
Yeah, I get it, but Cincinnati is just
somebody has to cover unless it's on a whole number.
Yeah, I mean Cincinnati. Like, what have they done to justify this spread here? Being favored by 5.5 on the road at Dallas.
I think the preseason spread, I was looking at it earlier today, had Dallas, I think, a 1.5 point favorite in this game back over the summer.
That makes sense. Of course, that was with Prescott and everything, but Cooper Rush has, he's an okay backup. He's not terrible. No, he's not a good quarterback.
Cooper Kupp might be better.
Right. Cooper Rush
at quarterback.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Right. Cooper Rush, not a good quarterback, but as far as backups are concerned, he's okay. He's shown that he can do well against mediocre or bad defenses. And Cincinnati has the worst defense in the NFL, according to the metrics. They can't stop anything. They just allowed Russell Wilson to throw for 414 yards. And overall, they can't do anything really well outside of throw the ball with Burrow to Chase and Higgins. And, Chase Brown's looking good too. But, they can't block.
Yeah, but then they have to give the ball back to the other team.
Right. They can't block. They can't stop the run. They can't stop the pass. They can't get to the quarterback. This team is just dreadful otherwise outside of the Burrow stuff. Again, they don't deserve to be this high of a favorite. And we saw this matchup already 2 years ago in week 2 of 2022. Cincinnati went into Dallas playing Cooper Rush, favored by about the same number of points, and they lost outright 20-17. Dallas's defense is a lot better right now with Micah Parsons. I broke down how Dallas's metrics look with Parsons because overall, like their whole body of work throughout the season is not really good. But in games that only Parsons has played, Dallas ranks 3rd in defense. So I think they can keep Cincinnati limited a bit offensively. They're not going to completely stop Burrow, but I don't think it's going to be an insane scoring amount. And so I think that, against this horrible defense, they're going to be able to move the ball. So I think Dallas can win outright. I'm going to bet them on the money line. I think this 5.5 is just way too much. 6 is way too much too. 5.5 is still way too much. So I like Dallas here. So who do you like in this game?
Yeah, I could certainly make a case for Dallas. I think last week I put all the marbles in the center on the Cincinnati Bengals, outlining how that game was so important against Pittsburgh. And sure enough, they do what they did so often. They score a touchdown, 7-0. Oops, 7-7. 14-7. Oops, 14-14. Oops, 21-14, 21-21. And then Pittsburgh ended up taking over the lead, and I don't think they ever surrendered it after that. They may have been tied once or twice, I think, since then. But that was basically Cincinnati's season, because if they win that game, they have this game against Dallas. They got who was it? I think Carolina maybe next, and then Cleveland or something like that. And all of a sudden, they're 8-7 and hosting Denver in week 17. Who they might likely be playing with a tiebreaker, and then at Pittsburgh, who might be resting players. So I have to believe that this team has to be somewhat dispirited after last week. And I think we've seen Dallas show some energy the last 2 weeks against Washington and then against the Giants last week, which tells me they have not quit on the season. They're hitting hard. Parsons being back is a huge benefit. So I also might be on the money line here, and I didn't play it in the Westgate contest, but I'll probably play it in the Circa contest as far as taking the points. Let me see what that line is in the Westgate. It's actually +6.
On Westgate.
Yeah, I'm sorry, in the Circa. In the Circa, it's +6. 5.5, I believe, in Westgate. Yeah.
Okay.
But I'll be playing it out of pocket, and if you are looking for 2 or 3 teams to play as an underdog money line, and they're underdogs. The 3 that come to mind are the last 3 on the schedule: the Rams, the Chargers, and the Cowboys.
Okay. I would put the Bears in there as well. I would. As far as money line underdogs, I like Bears and Cowboys the most.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, and I don't even know who else at this point. Maybe some injuries would dictate my other.
The difference with Cincinnati and San Francisco. Cincinnati had those injuries early in the season to Higgins and Chase. Well, they got them back, and they really didn't miss all that much. They were still scoring points when one or both of them were out, except for that game against New England to open the season. But have they been significantly impacted by defensive injuries to a greater extent than other teams? I wouldn't think so. San Francisco, on the other hand, has had some significant defensive injuries this year. So I can take a look and say that when you compare San Francisco and Cincinnati, both of whom were considered playoff contenders, and both of them, well, Cincinnati almost certainly won't make the playoffs for a second straight year. San Francisco has some work to do. I can understand San Francisco's 5-7 record more than I can understand Cincinnati's. What are they now? 4-8.
Yeah.
Because I could Cincinnati should not have lost 8 games. Maybe they should have lost 3 or 4. Okay, based upon who they were playing. San Francisco, it would have been tough seeing them winning many of those games with all the injuries when you combine them on both sides of the ball, not just when like Cincinnati was missing offensive players. So I would say that I can excuse San Francisco such a bit, which makes me a little worried because I can't trust Chicago. But that's why I got to stay off the game, as opposed to going against Cincinnati right now. I said last week that if Cincinnati did not win that game, forget about covering, which I needed them to do, but if they did not win that game last week, they might not win another game the rest of the season.
Yeah. And they, of course, they had the Higgins situation. So what if he sits out the rest of the year, maybe after this game or something, just because he doesn't want to get hurt. Like, I think that is on the table as well. But yeah, no, I mean, you're right. Like, Cincinnati hasn't had the defensive injuries for the most part. What they have had is departures in free agency, and like the ownership and the front office just unwilling to re-sign these guys.
They did a bad job defensively because they know offensively they had a Super Bowl caliber offense.
Yeah, and it's a shame that they're just wasting Joe Burrow's the peak of
prime years.
Right. Yeah, because I mean they've lost so many good defense players. Like DJ Reader is gone, Chidobe Awuzie gone, Jesse Bates gone. Like they've had so many guys.
Yeah. And it's not just losing the guys and the talent. It's the fact that when you're bringing in so many people, so many different people, you have to get all those parts working together, and that takes time. If you replace one person or 2 key players on defense, you can overcome that, but not if you're replacing 5 or 6 or 7.
Yeah, and they just haven't drafted well enough to replace these guys. So if you're going to let these guys go, you have to replace them, and they just haven't done it. So it's I mean, this is the decline of the Bengals. I've also been calling them a falling knife. The 3 falling knives being the Jets, the Niners, and
by the way, the other thing with Cincinnati, and I don't know what the answer is, but all those early season losses, in the first couple of weeks of the season. That's got little to do with injuries to the extent that you're preparing all off season for those first couple of games.
Yep.
And I don't know if that says something about the coach. I don't know if it says something about the general manager. Probably more about the general manager than the coach, because the coach can only coach the players that he's given. Okay.
Yeah.
And then ownership providing support to get the players the general manager wants.
Yeah. No, they were a complete no-show in week 1 against New England. So, and I know that, Jamar Chase was working himself back into playing shape because he missed all practice and stuff.
There was no excuse for that effort.
Yeah,
it's one thing to lose the game, but to only score 16 points against the Patriots in their condition.
Well, they scored only 10. They only scored 10. It was 16.
That's right. It was
and it was at home.
Yeah.
That's
right. Instead, they gave up 16.
Yeah,
you give up 16 points to the New England Patriots. That's a 2 to 3 touchdown win.
They were outgaining that game 290 to 224.
Yeah.
It's like, how does that happen? I don't. It's crazy. Cash the Bengals win total under 10.5 plus 105.
What are you waiting for? They should have done it a month ago.
Yeah,
now you got to wait till the end of the season because knowing certain they have to play the full 17 game schedule.
Yeah,
which by the way always never made sense, because if you're like a 2-7 team and the season is canceled or whatever, there's no way you play the rest of the season. That 2-7 team is going to stay, is going to end up going over.
Yeah, no, that generally is the rule of the sports books in Las Vegas, but online on FanDuel or BetMGM or Caesars, they'll pay you out.
They should.
They should. Yeah, I agree.
It's like the only rule that I consider almost as dumb, maybe dumber, is in baseball when you're betting an over under, and they say that the game has to go 8.5 innings. Okay,
right.
Okay, and you bet an over,
and the score is 12-7, and the game gets called after 7 innings. The over should be a winner. The under should be a loser, because if they resume the game and they played at 9 innings, that game is still going over.
Yeah,
you can't take away runs, regardless. On the other hand, if you played the under and the game is 2-1 when the game is postponed, I can understand that being no action, because there's no guarantee that the game would have gone over.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that the game would have stayed under. So I can understand that being a refund. But once the game has gone over, it can. When a game stays under, it can always go over as long as they continue playing. Once you've gone over a total, it can no longer go under or stay under.
Yeah.
People always confuse. I don't like it when people say, "Well, this game went under the total." No, it did. It started under and it stayed under, and will continue to stay under until it goes over.
Right. It's common sense.
That's my asshole of being a competent, and I've got a reputation to protect.
I know. That's no, it's common sense. I don't know why they don't go that route, but yeah.
And by the way, I could understand that years ago before they had computers. Now they can program all that sort of stuff in there.
Yeah.
That if this situation happens, here's how we grade the bets. If this other situation happens, here's how we grade it. You can do all those. I mean, that's why, with the computers and everything, and it's obvious, that's why we can have so many different things now that you could never have 15 years ago because of the increased computing power. You get all these index bets in the Super Bowl. You can bet on every individual, basically total number that the game will fall, because there's much more capacity, and the coding is not that difficult.
Well, yeah. Well, I think they rely too much on computers now, because when I was in Vegas, at the first night I was there, the MGM sportsbooks couldn't cash my tickets because of that outage that they had with I forget it was it Cloudflare or something or whatever. Something happened where there was an outage.
Well, they had a delay cashing it out.
What'd you say?
They had to delay it. I mean, you ultimately got cash, but it wasn't immediate. It wasn't immediately upon the conclusion of the game.
Well, I had to come back the next night because they said it was like 24 hours that they were down, and so they're like, we can't even give you odds, the updated odds. I'm like, really? It's ridiculous. But anyway, and luckily I was there for more than one day. I would have been pissed. So, all right, Andy, that's about it for the show. I love doing this with you every Thursday, so thanks for coming on. Do you have anything to plug here with your site? Let's go over.
No, I was just going to mention about the spreadsheet that I've been putting up for the last month and a half or so. I didn't get a chance to update it yet. I was tied up with a whole bunch of other projects and things, but let's see. It's only 11:15 Pacific time. I got a few more hours of work, so that'll be like one of the first or second things I do. So I would say, what's it now? It's 2:15 Eastern. I'd say by 3:30 your time. Those of you who are awake, and I know Walt, you will be one of them. You can look for that. The others, don't stress. Get a good night's sleep. It'll be there up there Eastern time in the morning.
Yeah, I don't get a good night's sleep. Hasn't been in the cards for me ever since my kids were born. But no, I will be up as well for a few hours looking at props and stuff. I already posted 2 props on the site. Kyle Pitts over receiving yards and Alvin Kamara over rushing yards. So I will be doing more of that. I'll post like a couple more tonight, and then the rest will be up on Friday.
So you are expecting Cousins to have a reasonably decent game?
I don't think he even needs to. In garbage time, it could get there. For Pitts only.
If he's around for garbage time,
that's true. Well, I mean, you don't.
I wouldn't be shocked, even though he's going home, if he has that bad first half. If they put Penix in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, as long as
remember, despite their record, they're still playing for a division title.
Yeah, as long as someone's throwing the ball, Pitts can catch the ball. So I like the matchup. Minnesota's been very leaky to tight ends recently, and I think given the struggles, I think they may focus on maybe throwing to Pitts more, just being safe.
Well, that's been one of the criticisms of the offense. That they haven't utilized them as much as they expected to coming out of, what was it, Iowa?
Florida,
I'm sorry, coming out of college. That he was going to be, I won't say a generational player, but he was certainly going to be an all-pro caliber player. But if he never gets the chance to catch balls, he can't achieve that.
No, I mean, look, he had a 1,000-yard season as a rookie. He's had some big games. I think the criticism is that they drafted him over Penei Sewell or Jamar Chase or Micah Parsons or Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle and Patrick Surtain. Had they drafted him 14 instead of 4, no one would be complaining. It's like Brock Bowers. Like Brock Bowers was drafted 12th, which is fine. No one's complaining about Brock Bowers. If Brock Bowers was drafted before Malik Neighbors and Joe Alt,
there'd be some question. Well, yeah.
Right,
Although he contributes blocking and catching as well. So
Bowers
could be the player that Pitch was expected to be.
Exactly.
And may yet still be. Again, depending upon who's tossing him the ball.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Bowers is. I already said he's the best tight end in the NFL right now. Travis Kelce's 34. It could be George Kittle. George Kittle's amazing too.
If he's healthy too.
Right. Yeah, he's always banged up, but Kittle's taken a step backward in production because Trent Williams is out. If Williams is out, Kittle has to block more. So that's affected him. That's not his fault. Still. But Bowers is terrific, and he's been going in the second round of my best ball drafts that I've been doing, which is kind of unheard of for a tight end, but that's how great he's been. So anyway, all right, guys, thank you so much for watching and commenting. Really appreciate it. Thank you, especially to John Sanders for the 311 super chat. Thank you so much, John. Just really appreciate it. And please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description for the merch store. I will be back on Saturday with Tom. Interested to see what he has to say about these picks. Our joint entry went 5-0 in the super contest as well. So hopefully we keep it going these next 2 weeks and hopefully walk away with a nice prize. But yeah, guys, love doing the show. Once again, Andy. And I will be back on Saturday, like I said, and have a great night, everyone. And I'll talk to you later.